Today we have an important question which we will deal with before we resume our discussion on the usual theme. The question is, how are you sure that what you receive is a guidance from the psychic? Mother has emphasized time and again that it is only the psychic guidance that is authentic and reliable. How do you distinguish this guidance from a guidance which may not be psychic at all, because it is a frequent experience, particularly among those who are devoted to this spiritual or the yogic path, that what purports to be guidance from the divine is not always necessarily so. The guidance may come, as is the experience of many, in the form of a voice. Now, Sri Aurobindo has warned again and again that it is dangerous to accept any voice that appears to come from within as coming from the divine. Because, in the first place, to receive the divine guidance requires considerable purification, strong faith, and entire reliance. There are number of cases where even in the very beginning of the sadhana, one hears a voice, and that voice guides you aright. This is going to happen. It happens. Don't do this. If you do, this will happen. Exactly. So, number of times this voice gets confirmed by events. Naturally, you develop a faith in that voice. And that is precisely what the source of that voice is looking for. Very often, the source of the voices is counterfeit, is what is called pseudo. And it comes in such detailed and small matters that itself must make you suspect. And as if that source has nothing else except watching you and guiding you. It works assiduously to create a faith in you. And once you take it as divine, thereafter that voice sticks to you. It doesn't leave you. Even if you realize at some stage that it may not be the right one, still it won't leave you. And it is our experience that it will not allow you to speak of it to your guru or someone who can guide you or someone who knows more than you. Very often, the sadhaks or sadhikas were told, this is too insignificant a matter, mother has no time, don't waste mother's time. What more proof do you need? Things are being proved. And so, in good faith, they kept away things from Mother and Sri Aurobindo. And once you are in their clutches, it is very, very difficult. Now, this is just to warn that every voice is not the divine voice, the mother's voice, or the guru's voice, or God's voice. There are number of layers between the soul level and our surface level. And these articulations of our own desires, of our own ambitions, of our ego on different levels, they take form of these voices, and the mischievous spirits, whose one aim always is to take possession of human beings. They don't want to take the trouble of assuming a human body, getting born, grow, and all that. But they want to possess a human vehicle. And they introduce themselves in the atmosphere of unsuspecting persons and give the guidance. Voice, speak. So, it is always safe when you hear a voice to ignore it, not to listen to it, offer it to the divine, offer it to Mother. Even in that process, even if you happen to reject a genuine voice, no harm. It is worth the loss. Now, how do you? But certainly, there are genuine guidance from the psychic. Usually, this psychic guidance does not come in the form of a voice, in the form of a command. It comes more or less as an intimation, a quiet, soft intimation, as a feeling which carries a certain authenticity about it. And then you know, my God, how is it I didn't think of this? It doesn't give you any alternative. It is this, it is this. But Mother points out that this guidance is not insistent. A vital guidance, a pseudo guidance, a mental guidance, always insisting, hammering, threatening, loud. But a psychic guidance is soft, communicative, in an authentic way, and there is no excitement. Everything looks self-obvious, obvious, and you know that it is from the psychic. So, to sum up what we have been talking, guidance need not be always in the form of a voice. Voices can be dangerous. The genuine guidance from the psychic is never insistent. It prompts. If you ignore it, once again it prompts. Still, twice or thrice if you ignore, or if you argue with the vital cunning argues against it, and you choose to ignore it, it withdraws. It does not threaten. It withdraws and waits till you are ready. That is the psychic guidance. There is a great sense of purity, a certain holiness about that intimation. It is a feeling not dependent on what you have read, what you have heard, what you have thought, but self-impelled. That is so as far as this important question. Many times, even with well-meaning people, the problem arises because the emotional being also puts forward certain feelings. And you know, the heart is the seat of emotions. The inner heart is the seat of the psychic. So, for all practical purposes, it is the heart. So when it is an emotional articulation, it is easy to mistake it for the psychic. Because the emotional expression, the emotional impulsion carries a certain warmth, brings emotions in your eyes, fills your being with that happy feeling, because it is the emotions that gather. So with the best will in the world, it is possible to mistake an emotional guidance from the emotional being, for the psychic. How to distinguish? An emotional feeling will always have a certain sense of excitement. You're full of joy. Ah, yes, I have found it. And the emotional being wants something and it puts forward. It may be a case of love, loving, you feel this is the right thing, this is my right choice, or something very pleasant, something very welcome, and the emotional being leaps up and you feel this is the right thing because it has come from here. But a psychic feeling has no excitement. You don't feel on the top of the world when it arises. You have a deep sense of humility and gratitude that the psychic, which is the center of God, has chosen to guide you. You are full of that. There is no question of elation, of ebullition of the emotional type. I cannot express myself more in the language that I know, but I suppose what is said, what has been said, should prove adequate as a guideline. Now, to resume our discussion, we were talking of immunity from all accidents, invulnerability against all adverse attacks. We observed that an accident is usually unforeseen, though what we think is sudden, we think is not calculated in the turn of events, it may be destined. We do not always have the eye to distinguish between what is destined and what is an accident. Some of you would know that at least 15 or 20 years before Indira Gandhi was shot, some person, I do not remember whether it was a sannyasi or some holy man, when she was catapulted into that high position, he said, this woman is going to meet a tragic end. She will be shot. People who had heard him say this at least 15 or 20 years earlier, they recalled it. And a few days earlier, before the tragic event, another holy person warned her that unless you do such and such a thing, you are in grave danger. But she did not take any steps. That was destined. It was not an accident. An accident is not in the calendar. That is why it is called accident. Here again, Mother draws attention to a possibility that when the soul decides to leave a body for whatever reason, maybe the person is behaving very stupidly, irresponsive to the call of the soul. In some way, there is great disharmony. And she says, the soul works to bring about an accident, sudden death. Not all accidents are so arranged, but there is a possibility. When the soul decides to leave, and there is no other alternative, say of sickness or any kind of that, a quick departure. These are extraordinary cases which we had better leave out of our discussion. But normal accident which takes place all of a sudden, unexpectedly, usually it takes place when you means the person concerned, the person is in a moment of unconsciousness. Unconsciousness in the sense that he is not present-minded. What he is doing, what is happening, thinking of something, imagining something. As Sri Aurobindo says in the Savitri, those fellows, those elemental beings, they are always on the watch, look out. In your moments of obscurity, they strike. They are on the lookout. So, immunity from accidents requires that you become more and more conscious. Try to be conscious, be where you are doing, be where you are living. Not that your body is doing some work or you are talking and your mind is somewhere. You have to be present, be conscious, and then something will take place. Even if there is a possibility of an accident, something happens, and either there is a narrow escape, or just a brush, or a scratch, or suddenly you find yourself outside that range, provided you are conscious. Now, it is, if you are lucky enough to be yoked to a divine presence, to a guru, to God, to the divine in whatever way, then it is doubly effective. Because if that remembrance is there, if that trust is there, that presence takes care. And what could have been a major accident, a fatal accident, passes just as a scratch. The karma is worked out in that form. That means you have to be fully conscious, and the faith must be strong that nothing can affect me without the divine will. Have complete faith in the divine protection and an attitude of surrender. So this centering of oneself in a consciousness turned towards the divine supported by an inviolable faith that alone can give invulnerability. Now that is basic. There are other factors. That is, there should be a certain harmony among the various members of our being. A well-coordinated movement of the mind, the heart, the vital and the physical. That harmony, working harmony, may be a harmony imposed from the mind. That itself strengthens the nervous envelope of which we spoke earlier and keeps off attacks, adverse attacks. So centrally, for a spiritual seeker, faith and arising from faith, not to indulge any movement of breaking out of the wall of protection woven around him. Each one who has faith in the Guru, in the Divine, by the very fact of commitment on both sides, a wall is erected around the person. And as long as we stay in that wall, we are safe. But if by any thought, by any feeling, vital movement, even physical movement, we walk out of the circle of protection, as Sri Aurobindo calls it, then you are in for it. So there is a big responsibility to stay in the circle of protection. If you get angry, for instance, with somebody, very difficult thing, I know, but if you get angry, at that moment you are out. If you think ill of somebody, that moment you are out. Your life movement must be consistent with the quality of conscious protection that is woven around you. That is why it is required that you cultivate and develop an integrated personality. And to be sincere. This is what is sincere. Mother's definition is to raise all the movements of your being to the highest level of consciousness you have attained. Each one of us has a certain peak of which we are conscious when we pray, when we are alone, when we meditate. Now, to that level, our morning to evening, everything must be lifted up, must be related to that. A very arduous requirement. But if we want immunity, invulnerability, this has to be done. We have to be sincere. Mother said somewhere, sincerity is the safeguard against all attacks. Sincerity to your commitment, sincerity to the Divine, whose protection you enjoy, sincerity to your own soul. This applies to spiritual seekers. But for others who are in the world living their normal life, all that we can say is they must be conscious. They must be fully aware. They must be present-minded and aware of things within and around them. Not a very high demand. We can't speak of faith with those people. But to be conscious, to be aware, then there is no loophole for the adverse attacks. That brings us to the 9th item. There are 2 or 3 more. which we shall pursue in our next session.